The Jaguar XJR-15 is one of the most fascinating, and, at the same time, one of the most underrated supercars of the early 1990s. For many automotive enthusiasts, it remains overshadowed by the more famous XJ220. But in reality, it was a far more extreme, more race-focused machine, and definitely closer to Le Mans cars than most road-legal vehicles of its era. From the very first encounter with the XJR-15, it becomes clear that this is not a conventional supercar. It was a machine created by the people responsible for Jaguar's victories in endurance racing, who decided to bring the emotions of the track directly onto public roads. The car looked like a Group C prototype to which someone had accidentally fitted turn signals and license plates. Its low-slung silhouette, wide wheel arches, massive air intakes, and centrally mounted V12 engine created a combination that was almost absurdly brutal for a road car of the early 1990s. Moreover, the XJR-15 was the first production road car made entirely from carbon fiber, even beating the legendary McLaren F1 in that regard. It was created at a time when most manufacturers were only beginning to experiment with composites. Jaguar and TWR were already building carbon fiber monocoques inspired by Le Mans racing. That is why today, the XJR-15 is regarded as one of the most important supercars of its era. It was not a compromise between comfort and performance. It was a pure manifestation of motorsport. Sitting inside it, the driver did not feel like the owner of a luxury car, but rather like a racing driver preparing for a 24-hour endurance race. And it is precisely this uncompromising character that makes the Jaguar XJR-15 command such enormous respect and emotion more than 3 decades later. The story of the Jaguar XJR-15 begins much earlier than its official debut in 1990. To understand the significance of this model, one must go back to the early 1980s, when Jaguar decided to return to the world of endurance racing. The brand still remembered its triumphs from the 1950s, when the C-Type and D-Type dominated Le Mans. But for 3 decades, the manufacturer had barely participated in top-level motorsport. Everything changed in 1982 when Jaguar began collaborating with Tom Walkinshaw Racing, better known as TWR. Tom Walkinshaw was a visionary and understood perfectly that success on the track could rebuild the sporting image of the British brand. In a short period of time, the TWR team created a series of Group C prototypes bearing the XJR designation. First came the XJR-6 and XJR-8, followed later by the highly successful XJR-9, which won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1988. That victory was a turning point. Jaguar defeated the dominant Porsche teams and once again became a symbol of British racing excellence. The car was powered by a massive, naturally aspirated 7-liter V12 engine, producing around 720 horsepower. The success generated enormous interest among wealthy customers who wanted to own a road-going version of Jaguar's racing machine. Walkinshaw recognized the potential and initiated a project to build a supercar that would be the closest possible equivalent of a Le Mans car approved for public roads. Thus, the idea of the XJR-15 was born. Interestingly, the project was initially developed almost in secret because Jaguar was simultaneously working on the XJ220 and feared internal competition. Eventually, however, it was decided that the XJR-15 would be a niche product aimed at the most demanding clients. In practice, it became one of the most extreme road cars of its decade. Behind the success of the Jaguar XJR-15 stood people who belonged to the absolute elite of the motorsport and automotive design world. Tom Walkinshaw was not only the head of a racing team, but also a man with extraordinary business intuition. He understood that after the Le Mans triumphs, it was possible to create a car that would be something more than just another supercar. Walkinshaw wanted to offer customers a genuine racing experience rather than a luxurious grand tourer with a powerful engine. To achieve this, he invited Peter Stevens to collaborate, the designer who a few years later would create the legendary McLaren F1. Stevens designed the body of the XJR-15 with an exceptionally pure aerodynamic approach. The car lacked the aggressive styling gimmicks typical of the 1990s. Its form was entirely subordinated to function. The low silhouette, flowing lines, and distinctive cockpit resembled a fighter jet more than a conventional road car. Stevens later recalled that one of the greatest challenges was creating a cabin that people could enter without the acrobatic skills required in real Group C prototypes. Early concepts were based on the monocoque of the racing XJR-8, but it quickly became clear that the interior would need to be enlarged and the roof raised. Despite these changes, the car retained its racing character. Development was carried out within a very small group. Body modeling even took place in parking lots after working hours, and the entire project was developed in enormous haste. Walkinshaw wanted a finished prototype immediately after returning from Le Mans in 1990, and remarkably, that goal was achieved. Thanks to the collaboration between Walkinshaw and Stevens, a car was created that still looks incredibly modern today. Many experts believe that the XJR-15 has aged far better than most supercars of its era. Its silhouette continues to make a huge impression, and its minimalist approach to styling has proven timeless. One of the greatest achievements of the Jaguar XJR-15 was its body construction technology. Today, carbon fiber is standard in hypercars, but in the early 1990s, it was a technology practically reserved for motorsport and aviation. The XJR-15 became the first production road car to feature a fully carbon fiber monocoque and bodywork made from carbon composites and Kevlar. In doing so, Jaguar surpassed the McLaren F1, Ferrari F50, and many later automotive icons. The construction was based on TWR's experience gained while building Group C prototypes. The starting point was the monocoque of the Jaguar XJR-8, which had survived the spectacular crash of driver Win Percy during the 1987 Le Mans race. Engineers used it for experiments and for developing a version suitable for road use. The carbon monocoque provided exceptional rigidity while maintaining very low weight. Thanks to this, the XJR-15 weighed around 1,050 kilograms, less than most modern compact cars. Such low weight combined with a powerful engine resulted in performance comparable to racing machines. At the same time, the carbon fiber construction was extremely expensive and complex to produce. Every example required an enormous amount of handcraftsmanship. TWR treated the project as a demonstration of its technological capabilities. Unlike racing monocoques, which could be crude and unfinished, the interior of the XJR-15 was intended to present a high standard of craftsmanship. Even so, the car remained extremely Spartan. Exposed carbon fiber was visible almost everywhere. The driver sat in a cramped cockpit, resembling that of a fighter aircraft, surrounded by carbon surfaces, switches, and racing harnesses. It was precisely this raw character that made the XJR-15 so special. It did not try to hide its origins. Every component reminded occupants that beneath the thin layer of road homologation lay a full-blooded racing car. The greatest source of emotion in the Jaguar XJR-15 was undoubtedly its engine. Behind the driver sat a 6-liter V12 derived directly from Jaguar's Le Mans racing prototypes. It was an all-aluminum engine equipped with a dry sump lubrication system, a forged Cosworth crankshaft, and Zytec electronic fuel injection. In road specification, it produced around 450 horsepower at 6,250 revolutions per minute and 570 newton-meters of torque. Today, such figures may not seem astonishing, but it must be remembered that the car weighed only 1,050 kilograms. Thanks to this, its performance was brutal even by modern standards. Acceleration from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour took approximately 3.9 seconds, while top speed exceeded 300 kilometers per hour. Some tests even mentioned the possibility of surpassing 320 kilometers per hour. However, The most extraordinary aspect was not the acceleration itself, but the character of the engine. Jaguar's V12 sounded like a pure racing machine. The noise was so loud that the car came standard with headsets and an intercom system allowing communication between driver and passenger. Many journalists later recalled that starting the engine without the headsets was almost a physical shock. The vibrations, noise, and heat made driving the XJR-15 feel more like an aviation experience than an automotive one. The engine was paired either with a 5-speed manual gearbox in the road version or a 6-speed straight-cut racing gearbox in the track versions. Naturally, power was sent to the rear wheels. It is also worth mentioning that 5 extreme XJR-15 LM versions were created, equipped with a 7.4-liter engine, producing over 700 horsepower. These were essentially racing cars built for private collectors in Japan. Today they are among the rarest and most mysterious supercars in the world. The cabin of the Jaguar XJR-15 was the complete opposite of the luxury traditionally associated with the Jaguar brand. In most of its models, the manufacturer offered leather seats, wood trim, and comfortable equipment, whereas the XJR-15 resembled the cockpit of a military aircraft or a Le Mans prototype. The driver sat extremely low, almost centrally positioned, surrounded by the carbon fiber monocoque. Forward visibility was surprisingly good, but getting into the car required genuine gymnastics. One had to swing their legs over the wide sill, slide inside, and practically drop into the seat. The interior was extremely cramped. There was virtually no luggage space, and the passenger seat was largely symbolic. Many people compared the cockpit to that of a fighter jet because switches, racing harnesses, and exposed carbon elements were everywhere. Even the engine startup procedure resembled an aircraft launch sequence. The driver had to activate the ignition, then the fuel injection controller, then the fuel pumps, and only afterward press the starter button. The interior featured virtually no sound insulation. Between the occupants and the engine was only a thin polycarbonate partition that barely reduced noise at all. Additionally, the racing gearbox with straight-cut gears generated a characteristic metallic whine. Cabin temperatures rose rapidly, while the air conditioning was largely symbolic. In practice, driving the XJR-15 over longer distances was exhausting and demanded immense concentration. Yet it was precisely this brutality that made the car so extraordinary. Drivers described it as an extreme and intensely emotional experience. In the age of modern electronically assisted supercars, the XJR-15 remains one of the last truly analog monsters. It forgave no mistakes, demanded respect, but offered a level of engagement practically unattainable in modern cars. To promote the XJR-15, Jaguar Sport created a unique racing series called the Jaguar Sport Intercontinental Challenge. It consisted of 3 races held during Formula One weekends in 1991 at Monaco, Silverstone, and Spa-Francorchamps. The concept was insane. Owners would hand over their cars to professional drivers, who would race them on some of the world's most prestigious circuits. To make things even more dramatic, the final race at Spa offered a $1 million prize for the winner. Famous drivers such as Derek Warwick, David Brabham, Armin Hanna, Bob Wollek, and Tiffany Dell participated in the series. The cars were extremely difficult to drive, and the races quickly gained a reputation for being brutal and unpredictable. During the Monaco round, Derek Warwick took pole position and won the race after an incredibly fierce battle. At Silverstone, victory went to Juan Manuel Fangio II, the nephew of the legendary Formula One champion. The final race at Spa became legendary because of the enormous prize money and the organizational chaos. Drivers did not even know how many laps the race would consist of in order to avoid potential manipulation of the results. Ultimately, Armin Hanna emerged victorious and claimed the $1 million prize. The series demonstrated both the potential and the difficult character of the XJR-15. The car had a tendency toward oversteer, and the Bridgestone tires quickly lost grip. Many drivers considered the car incredibly demanding and brutal. Martin Brundle once said that, "You don't drive this car, you fight it." Despite this, the races became legendary. The sight of 16 XJR-15s racing through the streets of Monaco or charging through Eau Rouge at Spa was something truly extraordinary. Today, the Intercontinental Challenge is regarded as one of the wildest and most underrated chapters in 1990s motorsport history. Driving the Jaguar XJR-15 was an experience completely unlike operating a typical supercar. Many journalists and drivers described the car as raw, brutal, and uncompromising. Jeremy Clarkson once called it the worst handling car in the world, although later tests showed that opinion to be exaggerated. In reality, the XJR-15 simply demanded enormous skill and respect. The car had no electronic driving aids whatsoever. There was no traction control, ABS, or stability management. The driver had only their own abilities and a gigantic V12 mounted directly behind them. Despite its very low weight, the car did not feel light. The steering was heavy, and the responses extremely direct. At the same time, the car offered excellent front-end feedback. The driver always knew exactly how much grip the front tires had, and could control the car with remarkable precision through corners. The problem arose under sudden throttle application. The massive rear tires could abruptly lose traction, and the car would instantly snap into oversteer. Many drivers recalled that driving the XJR-15 felt like trying to tame a wild animal, yet those who learned how to master it absolutely loved the experience. Thanks to its low weight and immediate engine response, the car delivered an astonishing intensity of sensation. Every movement of the steering wheel and throttle pedal had a direct effect on the car's behavior. That is precisely why modern collectors and drivers increasingly appreciate the XJR-15. In a world of electronically dominated hypercars, the Jaguar remains one of the last truly analog supercars. One of the main reasons for the Jaguar XJR-15's value today is its extraordinary rarity. Initially, Tom Walkinshaw planned to produce only 30 examples, but demand from wealthy customers exceeded expectations. In the end, 53 cars were built, although some sources refer to 50 plus 3 prototypes, or mention 2 additional examples carrying TWR branding. Of all the cars, only 27 received full road-going specification with a 5-speed manual gearbox and road registration capability. The remaining cars were prepared for racing or later converted into road versions. Additionally, 5 Extreme LM variants were built, equipped with more powerful engines and aerodynamic upgrades inspired by Le Mans. The cars were produced at TWR's facility in Bloxham, Oxfordshire. Interestingly, shortly afterward, the same factory began producing the Aston Martin DB7. Every XJR-15 was hand-built, and the manufacturing process was extraordinarily expensive. The price of a new car was around £500,000, making it one of the most expensive cars in the world. By comparison, the Ferrari F40 cost significantly less. Moreover, owners had to accept unusual purchasing conditions. Some cars first participated in Intercontinental Challenge races before being delivered to customers. Despite the risks, every example found a buyer. Owners included the Sultan of Brunei, Samsung chairman Lee Kun-hee, Vijay Mallya, and several famous racing drivers. Today, many examples remain hidden in private collections. Some cars have barely left their garages in 30 years and show fewer than 200 kilometers on the odometer. That is why every appearance of an XJR-15 at auction generates enormous interest among collectors. Although the standard Jaguar XJR-15 was already an extreme machine, TWR also created an even more insane version called the XJR-15 LM. Only 5 examples were built, all intended for Japanese collectors. The cars received a gigantic 7.4-liter V12 engine, producing between 700 and as much as 760 horsepower. It was essentially a Le Mans racing engine transplanted into a road car. The LM versions also featured modified aerodynamics. They received a larger rear wing, an additional front splitter, and a distinctive roof-mounted air intake. The cars were even louder and more brutal than the standard XJR-15. Interestingly, the project was carried out almost entirely in secrecy. According to many stories, the initiative for the LM version came from Japanese businessman Katsuji Tachi, who was allegedly connected to the Yakuza and the world of nightclubs. TWR agreed to build 5 additional cars for the astronomical sum of approximately $1 million each. Unfortunately, the cars proved extremely difficult to maintain. The racing engines required frequent rebuilds, and many examples were practically never used. Over the years, the XJR-15 LM became surrounded by an aura of mystery. Some cars disappeared into private collections in Japan, and information about them remained incredibly scarce. Only in recent years did one example appear publicly at the Tokyo Auto Salon. Experts now estimate that LM versions may be worth over $4 million, making them among the most expensive and rarest supercars of the 1990s. The Jaguar XJR-15 impressed not only with its origins, but also with its technical specifications. The car featured a centrally mounted 5,993 cubic centimeter V12 engine made entirely of aluminum and equipped with a dry sump lubrication system. The unit produced approximately 450 horsepower at 4,500 RPM, with power sent to the rear wheels through a 5-speed manual gearbox in road versions, or a 6-speed straight-cut racing gearbox in track versions. Curb weight was only around 1,050 kilograms, resulting in a fantastic power-to-weight ratio. The car accelerated from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in between 3.1 and 3.9 seconds, depending on specification, and reached a top speed exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. The body and monocoque were made from carbon fiber and Kevlar. The suspension came directly from Jaguar's Group C race cars and used a double wishbone setup with push rods at the front axle. AP racing brakes featured 4-piston calipers and ventilated discs. The car rode on 17-inch OZ racing wheels fitted with Pirelli P0 tires. The rear wheels had an impressive width of 13 inches. The car measured approximately 4.8 meters in length, 1.9 meters in width, and only 1.1 meters in height. Thanks to its extremely low center of gravity and aerodynamic bodywork, the XJR-15 delivered performance comparable to contemporary racing cars. However, it must be remembered that these capabilities came at the cost of an extremely raw character. Driving the car required immense concentration, and every journey became an intense sensory experience. Despite its extraordinary engineering, the Jaguar XJR-15 remained underrated for many years. The main reason was the almost simultaneous arrival of the Jaguar XJ220, which attracted far greater attention from both the media and customers. The XJ220 was more futuristic, more comfortable, and produced in greater numbers. Jaguar promoted that model far more aggressively, while the XJR-15 remained a semi-official project developed by TWR. Additionally, the price of the car was enormous. At launch it cost around £500,000, more than most competitors. Many customers also considered the car too extreme for normal driving. In practice, the XJR-15 was not suitable for everyday use. It was loud, hot, uncomfortable, and demanded significant driving skill. Yet those very characteristics are what caused appreciation for the car to grow over time. Collectors realized that the XJR-15 represents an era that will never return. It was a car created without compromise, before electronics and safety regulations began to dominate the world of supercars. Today, many experts consider the Jaguar XJR-15 one of the most important and underrated supercars of the 1990s. In some ways, it was even more special than the McLaren F1 because it was built in far smaller numbers and was even closer to genuine racing cars. For a long time, the Jaguar XJR-15 remained relatively inexpensive for such a rare supercar. As recently as around 2010, some examples sold for less than 200,000 euros, which today seems unbelievable. However, the situation changed dramatically in recent years. Collectors began to recognize the uniqueness of the model, its connection to Le Mans, and its pioneering carbon fiber construction. As a result, prices exploded. Today, road-going XJR-15s achieve between $1 and even $2 million at auction. Cars with extremely low mileage and complete histories can be even more expensive. Racing examples with intercontinental challenge history are particularly desirable, especially if they were driven by famous names such as Derek Warwick or Bob Wallach. The LM versions are even more valuable. Classic car market experts estimate they could be worth more than $4 million, although they almost never appear publicly for sale. The rise in the XJR-15's value stems not only from its rarity, but also from the growing interest in analog supercars from the 1980s and 1990s. In the era of hybrid hypercars and electrification, collectors increasingly appreciate cars that offer pure mechanical emotion. The Jaguar XJR-15 fits this trend perfectly. It is brutal, demanding, and completely devoid of electronic filters. For many collectors, that is the very definition of a true supercar. Although the Jaguar XJR-15 never achieved the popularity of the Ferrari F40 or McLaren F1, its influence on the development of supercars was enormous. Above all, the car proved that a carbon fiber monocoque could be used in a road-going vehicle. That solution later became standard in the hypercar world. Peter Stevens used the experience gained while working on the XJR-15 when designing the McLaren F1. Gordon Murray also visited TWR to study the methods used in the production of carbon fiber structures. In a sense, the XJR-15 became the spiritual predecessor of many later automotive icons. The car also demonstrated that there was a group of customers willing to pay enormous sums of money for a true racing experience on public roads. Modern cars such as the Aston Martin Valkyrie or Mercedes-AMG 1 follow a similar philosophy, transferring motorsport technology onto public roads. Jaguar, however, had already done this in the early 1990s. Moreover, the XJR-15 remains one of the most authentic examples of this approach. It was not styled to look like a race car. It actually was one. Many modern hypercars deliver extraordinary performance, but very few provide the driver with the sensation of interacting with a genuine Le Mans machine. The XJR-15 achieved that without any compromises. That is why today, it is increasingly regarded as one of the most important creations in the history of supercars. The Jaguar XJR-15 remains an absolutely unique automobile. It is not merely a supercar, but also a symbol of an era in which engineers could create machines without compromise and without omnipresent electronics. It was born from the passion of people connected with motorsport and was intended to bring the emotions of Le Mans onto ordinary roads. In practice, it became one of the most extreme road cars in history. It was insanely fast, loud, hot, and difficult to drive, but precisely because of that, it left a lasting impression on everyone who had the chance to experience it. At a time when many modern supercars are becoming increasingly sterile, the XJR-15 serves as a reminder of the era of pure mechanical adrenaline. The car never tried to be practical or comfortable. Every element was subordinated to performance and emotion. The sound of the naturally aspirated V12, the carbon fiber monocoque, the racing suspension, and the raw interior created an experience impossible to compare with anything else. Today, the XJR-15 is one of the most desirable classic supercars in the world. Only 53 examples were built, of which just 27 were road-legal versions, making every car an extraordinarily valuable piece of automotive history. Values continue to rise, and collectors increasingly appreciate its uniqueness. The Jaguar XJR-15 never became a mainstream legend, like the F40 or the McLaren F1, but perhaps that is exactly what makes it so fascinating today. It is a car for true enthusiasts, people who understand what the era of analog supercars was all about, and why machines as wild, brutal, and authentic as this extraordinary Jaguar will never exist again.